thanks for joining me for Purposeful Inspiration, another series where we are continuing or look at the sign language ministry and specifically the one in Seyvonnie Campbell's life. Welcome back, Seyvonnie. We're just going to jump into the questions.
No problem.
But just for those viewers who may have not watched the first video, I'm just going to recap. So you got into sign language without having any relatives, without having any friends who are deaf. You didn't know anything about it. You didn't have a coach, so to speak. So basically, initially what you learned, you went out and you sought that knowledge for yourself. And then during that learning phase into what sign language is and how it's done, you identified it as your purpose. And that's when you made that major switch in university in terms of what you are studying. So I want to ask you, how was that switch, that time in your life when you were studying something and it just wasn't working out, and then you just decided overnight or out of nowhere, to some people who are looking on, to just change to sign language? Like, who does that, and what is the value of sign language? But I don't want to know it from an outside perspective and what people said to you. I want to know, how was that for you personally? What emotion did you feel?
When I made the transition, Crystal, I was initially doing science and technology at the University of Western. When I made that transition to education and sign language interpretation, I realized that though I wanted to do it, though it is what I loved, I wasn't prepared for the emotional instability that I would have faced because of it. I had a support system in my mommy and a few other persons that I shared with. But then when you're alone with yourself and you realize that you have already spent a particular amount of years in the university and not doing as well as you would have hoped to do, and then the university asking you to leave because your grades aren't up to their standards. You know, being as honest as I can be, your grades aren't up to their standards. They asked me to leave the university. And that was like the heaviest blow for me in 2015. Yes, 2015. And after I fell into depression. I really fell into depression for a couple months. I went back home to Clarendon. I was there, my mommy was there, and it was just a phase where I didn't know what to do with my life. You know, what I initially started with, it didn't work out, and then to think about starting something else, I was just in a place that was very dark, very lonely, very, very, very uncomfortable. And I remembered one day my mommy was at home, she wasn't at work, and she took me in her arms, literally, like I felt like a little baby again, and she took me in her arms and she prayed for me. And she, after praying for me, she wrote on a paper that failure is not final. And I remember those 4 words, like those are the 4 words that literally brought me through that season. Failure is not final. Then she wrote, get back up, brush yourself off, and go again. And after that prayer, I started going back to church because I had stopped for a while. I started going back to church. I started reading my Bible again. I started doing the things that would uplift my spirit, because I realized that staying down there was not going to get me anywhere. So I had to do something to uplift my spirit. And then during that same time, I told her that I would like to change my degree major, because I cannot go back to the university to do what I was doing. I mean, they told me bye-bye. So I told her that I wanted to change my degree major, and she was very supportive. She said, no problem, Seyvonnie, talk to who you need to speak to and get it sorted out. And at that time, the university gave me 1 year off. So I had to sit out a year before I even considered to come back to do anything else. So they gave me 1 year off. And all that had elapsed at that time was a semester, which is half of a year. And I realized at that point, when I was strong enough to actually go back, I realized that the year has not elapsed as yet. It was just a semester, but I still had my mind was just made up to go back anyway. So I took myself and I went to the university. I went to my faculty head, I went to my HOD, I went to everybody I could go to ask them for re-entrance into the university and into the particular program that I wanted to do.
So I want to ask you, how was your Christian life before and after you identified your purpose? What was it like? Was there a major change, or was there no change at all? What was it?
There was a very big change, and it was evident to those around me, not just to me, because before I made the switch to actually focus on sign language and doing it, I was just literally going through the motions at church. You know, you're asked to do a song here, you're asked to lead, but it had no meaning at the time. It had no meaning literally. But when I switched to sign language, I realized that when I'm asked to sign at church after switching, then it became more meaningful. It became more meaningful, and because it is what I want to do, because I know that it's my purpose, because I was fully aware of that at the moment. I spent more time doing it. I dedicated more time to it. So I allowed God to minister through me, through sign language at church. And then after going into the deaf community now, after being involved at school with sign language, I entered the deaf community via that medium, and signing with deaf people, I realized that I can use that as an opportunity to tell them about God, because they aren't hearing, so they can't listen to messages, they can't come to church and get the songs and all of that. So there must be some other medium that Christ can be introduced to them. And I realized that with every deaf person I came in contact with, after realizing that that was my purpose, I try in whatever conversation we're having to tell them about Christ, remind them that Christ loves them, remind them to go to church, remind them to read their Bibles, remind them to pray, you know, just sharing an encouraging word so that they can see Christ through me.
Okay, that's awesome. So there was a drastic change for you in how you operated at church. So it was, before it was just a regular routine action that you did. But once you got deeply involved, it became that ministry, that tool that you wanted to use, so let God be seen through you.
Yes.
Alright, so that's awesome. You speak highly of God and how He has been using you and directing you. How I want to share with our viewers one specific moment in time where you were sure that the hand of God was upon you, like it was that confirmation that this is God telling me that this is the right thing to do.
There are so many. Alright, let me go back to 2015, because that year was a very special year for me, whereas my transition is concerned. In 2015, there was this competition that my church held, a national competition where you entered a category, sign language was one of the categories, and I entered that category and I won the trophy. And because of entering that competition, the international youth director for the Church of God of Prophecy was at the awards ceremony, and he saw me and he's like, I need to get that girl at General Assembly. General Assembly is in Orlando, Florida, and it was like 5 months after the youth awards. At that point, I had no visa, I didn't even have a passport, and I definitely had no money. I was out of school, I was wondering what to do, and I was falling into everything was happening at that point. And I'm like, okay, God, let me see what you're going to do, because if I just wanted to see how it was going to work out. So I attempted to get the passport, which I did, and then there was a visa application. I did it online, I sent it in, I got a date for the visa interview in September of that year, and the assembly was July of the same year. So just think about that. The appointment is September, the assembly is July. it not look like it's a go work, not true. So at that point, I wrote a letter to the embassy, explained the situation to them, and they changed my visa date. That was God. I had no part in that. When I relive the story and I think about it, I'm like, how God changed the date from September to June? It just doesn't make no sense, but He did it. He did it, and I went to the interview. Remember, I'm out of school. I was working a full-time job. I wasn't doing anything, and I went into that interview. I told no lies, and I was granted the visa. I got the visa, got my passport. Now is the time for the money come. I need money to pay the plane fare, the airfare. I need money to get stuff to go up. And God just started to send people, Crystal. He just sent persons to sow into the ministry. Because I don't believe they were sowing into me. They saw what God wanted to do. And if he had opened the doors for the passport, He opened the doors for the visa, He had already opened so many doors. And I believe, Krista, that if He starts something, He is going to see it through to the end. So I couldn't see it, but I just know that He's going to do it. Person started to sow, person started to give. I got calls to just come and collect some cash to put towards it. And everything came together in such a short space of time, and I was able to go to Orlando, Florida in July, and I was able to stand on that stage and represent Jamaica, and represent myself, represent my ministry, represent my God at the International General Assembly. And it was such a blessing. I've got testimonials afterwards, persons coming to me saying how blessed they were, how you know, they really believe that God's hand must be upon me for me to have such a strong testimony, and for God to actually see me through to that point. And it was at that point, Crystal, I realized that this must be the hand of God. Like, there's no other explanation. I cannot explain it any other way. I cannot attribute any credit to any other person. It was God and only God.
That's awesome. So you have seen Him guiding you.
Yes.
Do you have any, especially for sign language and your ministry, do you have any guiding scriptures or that story in the Bible that you keep going back to time and time again to remind yourself to continue this journey?
Yes. He that began a good work in you shall see it, or shall perform it to the end. That is what has been carrying me and is still carrying me right now. I haven't finished the degree just yet. I have 3 months or 4 months left to go getting that degree, and God has just been faithful. He has been faithful. I keep reminding myself that even when we're not faithful, God is so faithful to His word. Whatever He says, He's going to see it to fruition. He's going to see it to the end. So that's what I hold on to.
Okay, so you have heard it from her. He who has begun or started a good work in you, He will see it through to the end. And I want to say thank you, Seyvonnie, for joining us for the second part, and we look forward to seeing you in the second part, in the third part.
No problem.
And I hope you were inspired to say that it's not always going to be easy, and your purpose won't always transition as glamorously as you expect it to. You will have ups and downs and moments of depression, moments of giving up, moments when you're faced with big decisions. But once you trust in God and continue to hope in Him, and you have a good support system around you, then you can push the limits and accomplish your dreams in so much more than you could ever imagine. And if you have noticed that just being faithful and trusting in God has taken her to the national level in Jamaica, where she was the national winner for the sign language category, for the sign language solo category, and I must add that her group as well, the church group, won the group category as she led that section. And then she was able to minister at the International Assembly for the Church of God of Prophecy. So just trust God, whatever your purpose is, and you don't have to know anyone before. God will put the persons in place for you to do your ministry. And if it's a little that you get to do, and if no one sees you on that big platform, I want to encourage you. We want to encourage you. It's not about who sees you. It's about doing the work of God. God. Thank you.